after games this year, win or lose, I wonder what you want to sit in here and tell us, hey, that's what kind of team we are. That's where we hang our hat every day, every game, and you know, I guess it's an identity question. But.
Yeah, that's a real good question. I think you want to be physical and, you know, both sides of the ball within the, you know, especially in the trenches. You want to be a team that discipline and executes in a way that I think we, you know, showed flashes of last year. And I think what you're going to look at is one that's not going to beat itself, and play consistently and consistently hard through the game and giving itself a chance to win in the fourth quarter. And that's a pretty simplistic answer, but I think that's where it's at. I think we've talked about, you know, progression here, progression there, but now you got to find a way to take another step, and that's you know, hopefully we'll see that and see it on a regular basis.
Has that been a thing for you always? I mean, throughout your coaching career, a lot of coaches will say, right, we're defensive minded, or we want our offense to dictate, or whatever. What's been yours throughout your career?
Yeah, just consistency. In fact, we met with our leadership group this morning, Coach Gildersleeve and I told him we're talking about some of those things, and I said, guys, just so you know, the day that we sit at 9-0, it's going to be the same intensity it was if we were 1-8. I said a couple guys in that room, maybe Rich Miller and Mike Nowitzki can attest, and I said, you know, my expectations and intensity will be the same if we're down by 30 or up by 30. And I said and that's a consistency that we want within the program, and so we're not going to let those things dictate our emotions, our attitude, and our effort level. And I think for us to build this correctly, for the consistency and over the long haul, that has to be at the forefront. And I would say that's probably been the way I've gone about it for 15 plus years now. Probably to a fault at times that in the early days I probably didn't enjoy enough of it, but it was because we're going to keep going because now an expectation's there. So I think that's kind of in our DNA, and that's where we want it to be.
Coach Simpson mentioned the other day that Rich Miller's sort of at the heart of what you guys do as a defense. I mean, do you see that, and just how have you felt about how Rich has sort of assumed a leadership role with this group?
Yeah, I mean, like I think I've said it here before, you know, when Rich entered the transfer portal and we said, you know, Rich didn't start at Buffalo, and probably would have been in another rotational situation there if he had stayed. So when he came, it was all those things that Chris is kind of alluding to about him, and it's off the field how he goes about it, but he's a guy that knows all three linebacker spots. He knows the defense. He knows the expectation of how we practice, how we go about it, how we're going to take care of our business, all those things. So when he says that, and then, you know, his voice and his consistency on what he does and the expectation that he puts on others as well as himself is really part of that standard we're striving for.
To build on that a little bit, we've talked about how he's gotten some of his friends here and play for the program from Detroit, but for him to be willing to do that is not necessarily a reflection of the school because he's only been here for 1 year. It's a reflection of you guys. How much does that resonate with you that he vouches for you guys?
It means a ton. It means a ton. And, you know, and you could probably say this, you know, similar about Mike and Trevor and some of them because it's, you know, when you go into things, especially the way, you know, some of the ways that they went about it, it's about trust and faith of how things are going to work out. But they also, it's because, you know, it's any of us can do that. Where we can be comfortable is when you walk in each day, you have an idea, and that's the part of the next step for us is when guys walk in now, they know the routine and the expectation. And I say it a lot of times to farmers, you know, and it may be firm and it might have a little bite to it, but I'll say fair. And then they'll and I say, if it's not, tell me. But I think when they know, so when you talk about Rich and where he came in, he's going to say, you know, how he believes and why. And that can go to, you know, the same thing his parents felt because they've known really it starts with Chris Simpson right there and the job that he's done at that position, but also the outstanding job I think he's done recruiting in Detroit and Michigan for us.
We spent a lot of time talking about a lot of the newcomers, the transfers, JUCO guys.
Mm-hmm.
How have you seen the guys that got recruited over, like Daniel Highshaw, Tywin Berryhill? How have you seen them kind of respond to those newcomers?
Yeah, and how did you refer to that as recruited over? Oh, why would you say recruited over, if I may ask? Because nobody got recruited over. Guys got recruited to help make this roster better. I want to make sure we understand that, okay? And when those guys are recruited, they're coming in here to compete. And nobody was promised anything. And right now, Daniel Highshaw is more than holding his own. Okay, Daniel Highshaw just wasn't healthy last year, and there's times where, we really had no complete idea what he would be. Okay, again, I don't mean to be defensive. Okay, what I really mean by that is sometimes guys will go, we're going to take so many players at each position. So we should get lesser players, like guys that aren't as good as Kai Thomas, because we have Daniel Highshaw, or should we bring in another? I mean, the premier programs of college football keep recruiting, right? And why wouldn't we do the same? But that honestly that's part of the mentality we have to keep changing inside our program and outside our program, because we have to keep bringing in players to compete and go about it. If you don't like competition, I don't know if Power 5 football is for you, or if college football in general. So I've believed in that, and I'll go back to being a Division III coach, and I kind of referred to that earlier. People ask like that, how do you sustain it? It was pretty simple. We had a roster limit. Everybody paid for their own way. It's all optional. How much work do you want to put in to get it done? Well, now we just move it up a bunch of notches here, and if you don't want to compete, that doesn't mean we don't believe in you, but you've got to be able to show that you can stay healthy, be dependable, reliable, and accountable to do the things we need to do. And I think Daniel's done an outstanding job. He's had as good a camp as anybody.
And I guess on that note, with the competition up and down the roster, how has that elevated either the depth or just the overall quality that you have?
Well, I think we're getting there. We went through a lot of things yesterday on our non-practice day as a staff, and we start talking about things and looking how things are starting to fit together. We looked at if we were to get on a plane and go play, where we're at. And, honestly, there were days a year ago we're sitting filling the X amount of slots at the end. The last 5 seats in the plane, we'll take some of the guys who've been practicing really hard and doing some things. Now, it's going to be pretty competitive for some guys that maybe even were in those roles, or a newcomer that thought it was going to happen sooner. It's going to be very competitive. So are we getting there? Yes, and I think our players, from what I've heard as well through Daniel and our communication staff, is I think our players are alluding that to you about the competitive nature of things a little bit more than maybe the past, which, especially in where we are in camp, it forces you to be locked in. You better, when you show up here this afternoon for meetings, you better be paying attention. When we do walkthroughs in the evening, you better be locked in and making sure that you know your assignments and carried over to the installation to the next day. Because if not, somebody else that's going to be close in talent level is going to be there to take some of those reps and opportunities away if you're not. And that's how you get to build a program, in my estimation.
Hey, Lance, while we're on the running backs, I've got a question kind of along those lines. Other than the talent in the room, which you've talked about and we've talked a lot about throughout camp here, what are some ways or reasons you think the running game will be better or improved or a strength or whatever, however you want to put it this year?
Just holistically, I think about, you can start with our coaches and understanding a little bit about whether it be who we're playing against schematically. We can talk about experience and guys working together. We can talk about what we can do complementary-wise off the run game with the pass game and vice versa. There's a lot of things holistically, and then experience within the group. And I think, we have 5 running backs that have played now in Power 5 football games. and that makes it exciting and challenging and all those things. But you know, now the thing is, you know, I was fortunate to coach running backs for 10 years. Is that, you know, there's a rhythm to it as well, and that's the other part of this, that you just can't keep rotating until a guy gets a feel for things as well, and that again is going to be part of the balancing act. But I do think we're holistically better in a lot of areas. I think our tight ends are blocking better. I think our receivers have embraced things that we're doing that'll help us in the pass game, but embracing some of the roles that they have to do within the run game as well. And you put it all together, and I think you see better results.
Any other questions?
Coach, Jared Casey's been on scholarship, but can you walk us through that decision?
I'm sorry? To walk through it? Well, I think he earned it, and you know, we did that last spring. You know, yeah, we called him in and had him FaceTime his parents and told him it was well-deserved. And as we looked at it and through those, he had last semester paid for as well. And, you know, this is me, and I don't try to do this too often, but when young men earn scholarships like that, it's twofold for me. One, I think that's really neat and well-deserving, and I think I've tried to keep it in a good spot. But I also know there's a lot of other walk-ons that work extremely hard in our program that could be on the cusp or whatever, and I try to keep that in the back of my mind as well when we do that. The other part is I think sometimes that the awarding of a scholarship has taken away from the individual, and it becomes, you know, a scripted act of some sort. That's my opinion. Everybody can do what they want to do, but it's not about how the guy gets it and who told them and all of that. That it puts more light on other people than it does the young man who really got it, in my estimation, many times. So that's why we didn't have a bunch of cameras there when we did it, and you know, and that's kind of where we went. Okay, I can also tell you, I know it has never been asked. I know the Jared Casey story is very special. Quentin Skinner is a walk-on. He's been on scholarship as well. So, I mean, there are some guys like that. So, I don't know, everybody see the races, who tweets that out the fastest, okay? But you know, I've tried to balance that. But, you know, there's things in there that I guess I could say for Jared's consistency, it isn't about catching one pass. You know, that's not why Jared earned a scholarship. And I think part of that went through his play the rest of the year. It went through where it was progressing in his role throughout spring practice. Okay, I guess that's part of it. So I can't remember, as we were wrapping up meetings after spring, I let Jared know multiple times that we're progressing in a way to be patient as he continues to be asked. And then, yeah, watched him have a very, very good moment. I think Andy Kotelnicki's the only one that has it on film. So you'd have to talk and see what his price is to release that or something.
Lance, we've talked a little bit about wide receivers, but we've not really talked about Trevor at all. Just his growth and maturity over the past year plus since he's been here, plus beyond that. And what have you seen from him?
I think Trevor Wilson's had a solid camp, and again, it's been Trevor works extremely hard, and you know, I can't say he's had a lot of flashy big catches like maybe he did early last season, but that's fine, and I think that's part of his maturing processes, because I think in years past he'd be a little more frustrated, and he'd be wondering, and he'd be pressing. Now he's been very consistent in what he's doing and understanding it, and Trevor's going to help this football team a lot this year.
Coach, do you wish you could have an exhibition game against other schools like they do in almost every other sport, because of the fact the guys are probably sick of hitting each other and all that?
Yeah, Gary, that's a good question. I think I've had that somewhere asked before, but I don't know. been in college football my whole career, so I've never. I know we're saying they talked about where they should do that in the spring, and then our competitive juices will get us to a point where the point of doing a preseason game to get things. I caught the end of the Chiefs game. I don't think Coach Reed lost sleep on that or anything. They got people evaluated, and you go. At Division III, boy, there's a lot of Division III references today, but we did have a scrimmage. And actually back when you could do 2-a-days, it was kind of a joint practice day. And yeah, it was good. It was good to go against somebody else and kind of evaluate yourself. I'm probably fine where it's at, though, to be honest. And the reason is, if you lost anybody, but injury-wise, you would feel terrible that way in an exhibition. So I like the fact that I guess we kick it off and get going. They all count.
Last year, junior's been having a great camp in Cincinnati. What's it mean to have former Jayhawks succeed at the next level?
Oh, it's awesome. And it couldn't happen to a better guy, and how hard he's worked and his whole story, which many of you know better than I do. Very proud of him. It was interesting after the mini camps and all that early in, I think it was in May or whenever that was, Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, his father, Jimmy, is a friend of my wife and I, and he sent me a text that, that Kwame was doing really well. And he says, and Joe likes him. And he goes, and that'll be good. So, but I think the other thing with that was really good, that I think we're going to be able to kind of continue to use in our program is Andy Kotelnicki had talked to Kwame as they were going through things even before the draft, and then after, as he's gone through some of these things, he talked about things we do in our offense, and he said having to know splits and alignments and motions and where to be when the ball snap versus lining up on the right, left side, inside or outside, definitely help prepare him to get to the next level. And again, you can talk to our current players about that, and of course we'll use that as we recruit young men across the country.
Lance, what about special teams? What do you see from the kicking game?
Yeah, we're starting to get to that point, John, where we're going to put a little more together in unit stuff. It's hard to simulate all that. You got to really be careful on the running and the, really stress you're putting on it. But I've been very pleased, with our kickers. I thought our kickers today, we did a red zone period with field goals. We had our most consistent day. I think our return units, obviously we talked about Kwame. It's a good lead-in because, punt return will be a big area that we miss them. Luke Grimm and Devin Neal will probably be a couple guys back there that we feel very confident in moving forward in the punt return game. I think we know what Kenny Logan brings to us in the kickoff return game. Devin, Kai Thomas will also be involved, as well as others. The way we've kind of broken up, I'm very happy the way Ty Woe has handled our coordination of our teams and kind of broke them back up though with lead coaches. But obviously we know how important they are. I'll never forget back when I was a grad assistant, and Coach Alvarez would always talk about that first weekend. You start watching all those games on different nights, or these ones on these 0 weeks, and where is special teams early in the season, and what factors those can play, because those are the harder ones to assimilate, and we've got to make sure we're good out of the gate.
With you guys bringing in some defensive backs and linebackers, will that give you some more depth?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Back to yesterday's conversation, we start talking about guys. We have a walk-on graduate transfer in Andrew Russell, who came from Michigan. And Andrew was somebody we recruited at Buffalo and then didn't go on. He was a lacrosse player, went to Michigan to play lacrosse. He was high school teammates with Mike Nowitzki. And he's played some special teams at Michigan. He gave up lacrosse and stuck to it. We have a guy like him competing. Right now he might be some backups on some teams. those are some body types we just didn't have enough of last year. You talk about the linebackers as well. You know, the amount of guys there. Donovan Gaines is another walk-on linebacker that's been big in teams. Dylan Downing, but again, you look at the two deep of the other, just in our linebackers as well. It should be a more productive situation than where we're at a year ago. Same thing with all those running backs. You know, they should be good special teams guys. And it's not into the point where we have to save snaps because they're always on the field. We can use a lot of these guys. Torrey Lachlan, Quentin Skinner have been some of our best special teams guys as well.
Lance, you've been pretty complimentary of Jason in recent weeks. For him, in what ways has he improved, and what strides have you seen him make in recent weeks?
Decision making and accuracy, I think, are two. I think are probably the two biggest ones that I've seen, and I think he's continued to do that. And I think Jalen has played well here the last few practices as well. And I keep using those things, but it's totally different night and day than where we were a year ago as we were in the selection process.
Lance, maybe this is too abstract and too theoretical, but you talk about being multiple and having possibility of many running backs in the field at a time. Andy's talked about if you have 7 linemen who are worthy for some packages, getting them out there. Basketball has gone to kind of a positionless format. Do you think there's a way in football where maybe it is just a matter of getting the best other 6 guys on the field at some points, that maybe positions and designations and responsibilities don't matter so much?
Well, there's some of that, I think. I think that's a fair question. But if you had 5 running backs out there, you know, okay, you better make sure some can block, and you got to have some that can have some type of vertical, you know, receiving ability, as well as some precision in route running and things like that aren't always just natural. And then you have to find ways to get these things practiced. But can there be some? Yeah, if that's what it takes. Because if not, then again, everybody's looking at, you know, the uniqueness, I think, between, you know, just say football and basketball is we set the ball and start a new play every time. It's not continual movement. So there's personnel. You look and see what personnel is out there, and then they make calls and adjustments off that right away. So, you know, there's different things. So if you've got a bunch of running backs in there or a bunch of tight ends, you know, vertical, there's certain things that are probably off the plate. And again, then all of a sudden you've got 9 and 10 man boxes. That makes it's pretty tough. But can you be multiple? Yes. And I think as we evolve, I think there's some very creative ways that Andy and the offensive staff will be able to do that.
I want to get your perspective on O.J. Burroughs. We talked about him at the end of spring as someone that really developed, but how have you seen him grow even more, I guess, over the course of the summer, and what has he brought during fall camp?
You know, I think we talked about last year the big step he made from the end of the season through spring and maturity and trying to change his body and all the things we challenged him. I think he's become a better run player. I think he's being physical. As I've said before, OJ's as good as any player I can remember in my time of breaking on a ball and reading things. And again, and I just think he's starting to feel more comfortable just as a player in our program. And when guys start playing and seeing things more and more, they're out there, they become stronger just physically, and then all of a sudden the game just starts slowing down. And hopefully those are going to be some things that he continues to evolve, because I think he has a bright future.
And then you mentioned Quentin Skinner going on scholarship. What has he brought to the wide receiver room?
Well, just a great work mentality. You know, he's got the length and the speed that we're looking for. You know, again, when we got here, didn't know the complete story. You know, hurt. You know, he was coming off a knee injury and probably stymied his recruiting some. But to get here and start working to get healthy. But you know, he can do a lot of different things, and he's willing to block. He's willing to play special teams, but he also runs well enough. And with that, you know, he's a longer striding guy that he can take the top off some things with us. For us, I think him and Stephen McBride, Trevor give us you know, maybe a little better speed than people give us credit for.
All right. Very entertaining. Your loss. That's right. Good to see everyone again. Let's get started. Fire away.
Me again, sweet. Man. Hey, I asked Lance this, and I'd love to get your input too. Other than the talent in the room, the running back room, what are some ways you think or know that position and your production there is going to be better this year, or at least hope?
Well, almost 20 years of coaching experience, first of all, right? Just seeing guys run around and how they do. In the live periods that we have had, you know, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that tackles are getting broken. You know what I mean? You know, there's more of that stuff happening. You see in the thud periods that we have, right? Because, you know, you have to go limited amount of live reps, right? You know, in fall camp. And in your thud periods, you see vision and running with low pads and intent to get extra yards, right? And so you just observe those things, you know, from every one of those guys. Gives you confidence that, to your point, there's depth, right? You know, which you want. You know, we've talked about that before, and we want to be able to run the football well here. I think that's you know, every championship team is able to do that, right? At every level, they're able to effectively run the football, and you have good running backs to do that, right? And so that competition in that room and the additions of guys that we've had and the development of the guys that are still here is it's important to our success, and they're doing that well.
Curious for your position group, the tight ends, and you mentioned being able to run the ball effectively there. How have that position group as a whole taken a step forward in run blocking?
Well, you know, it's one of our camp objectives. We said we want to figure out who and how well we can block C and D gaps, as we say, right? Because that's kind of what they do, and they've really embraced that. I think it's probably as a group, that's been the biggest improvement that I've been able to see in the how many ever months we've been here, is that they're willing to go in there, which is a step for those guys. But then we have to, of course, and we're always looking for the all-around tight end, right, where you can go in there and get dirty, but we don't want to just have a bunch of glorified offensive linemen, you know, wearing 80s numbers. We want to have guys that can be legitimate, you know, threats in the pass game as well and get completions. And so they've been able to do that. We put a lot on their plate with assignments and everything like that, and they've handled it well. You know what I mean? They're physical, right? And they've embraced that. They understand that.
And in terms of the offensive scheme, doing the outside zone stuff this time last year, having to teach it, how much growth have you seen in the course of this fall camp, and how much does it help that now you don't have to teach, you can kind of focus on other stuff?
You know, we're a lot further along. I've said that, I think, when we were here after the second practice, right? Okay. And to add how many ever more practice since, I don't know how many we finished today. Where are we at? Is it 16 today, maybe? 15? Exactly, right? I don't even know what day it is. It's camp, right? So to see how much we've grown in that time gives you confidence, you know what I mean? You know, and I've said before, the important thing in coaching, I think, is to really figure out what your guys are capable of, you know, and what are the limitations, what do you want to do and not want to do, and what can they do and can't do, and then to make sure those packages grow. And so to have that much more time to hone in on what we want to be able to do up front has been a blessing, right, of course, for our guys, and to have our first spring last spring and to get into as many practices as we had this fall, you're really starting to get a clear picture of that stuff. But there's our run game has developed a lot. I'm excited about it.
With someone like Daniel Highshaw, then, what have you seen from him now getting to go through the full fall camp, and what has he done to kind of stand out to you?
Well, you know, I mean, a year ago, we didn't even get to see him take a rap. You know, we got to see the first time we ever see him carry a ball was in spring football. And so now to have that, and he goes into fall camp, and now he's got, like I said, whatever, how many it is, 15, maybe it's 14. I don't even know, guys, honestly. It's in the teens, right, of camp, of practices. He's gaining confidence in what we're doing. He's gaining vision on what's going on, right? And the thing that we're looking for out of all those guys in that room when we talk about the competition there is you're looking for the consistency to be able to do it over and over again. And you can't evaluate consistency unless you're able to kind of see a big picture, right, over the course of a number of practices, right? You can look great in one practice, but if the next two you don't look good, you know, that's an issue. And so Daniel's been able to show some consistency, as well as other guys in the room throughout fall camp.
You and Lance and Jim have talked about Bean having some of his best practices since day one. What are you seeing from him then that gives you the idea that he is developing, he is building, and what kind of maybe challenges did you give him during the offseason to come back with and try to address?
Well, he, you know, is understanding what we're doing, right? I think the competition in the room helps everybody, as we've talked about here before. That makes the whole football program better if you have competition in that room. But his understanding of what we're doing, his anticipation, and his ability to react to a stimulus has changed immensely. He's still fast, right, which is good. And so when he does carry the ball or gets out and scrambles, it's an impressive level of speed. But those things for him are grown, or we're a lot further along than we were a year ago with him that way.
Is there, I know we talked a little bit about this in the spring and kind of the way you guys can use him given his speed and his versatility we saw at the end of last season when Jalen was starting. Are there ways that you can use him maybe outside of throwing the ball that you plan on doing? Or how do you just balance taking advantage of his skill set versus him just being a backup quarterback?
Well, you know, and I've said before in this room, you know, your personnel dictates what you do. And we have some depth at a lot of different positions, right? We can talk about a bunch of receivers, we can talk about a bunch of running backs, talk about 2 quarterbacks, right? Okay, we can talk about these tight ends. And with that, I'm going to use the word parity, right? Because we still want to get some of these guys to an elite level, comes the ability to put stress on teams with being able to use different personnel groupings that way. And as I've said before, we are not afraid to use multiple personnel groupings any way that we can. How many ever tight ends, receivers, running backs, quarterbacks on the field necessary to help us move the ball effectively down the field. But maybe to your question specifically about individual skill sets, the system is the players. So if your quarterback has this certain skill set, the schemes that you're doing should complement his skill set, not the other way around, right? Okay? And you can say whatever you want. You can say we recruit to a system, or in the NFL they would say that we draft to a system. Okay, at some point your system will be challenged based off the personnel that's available in the room. And so we want to make sure that we're doing a good job and we're always flexible enough to be able to have certain packages grow or expand based off of the ability of our players.
So I guess maybe to boil some of that down, then could you conceive using him elsewhere then if the opportunity arises?
Well, we like to have 2 good quarterbacks. Do you know what I mean? Right? You know what I mean? So I don't know if you're insinuating, hey, because of speed, could he be a receiver? Could he take handoffs and stuff like that? Sure he could. But you want to make sure that, because every rep that he takes out there is a rep that he loses playing the quarterback position, right? And so we want to make sure that we have depth in that room, right? And so he's doing that. And he's developed great there. I know Coach has said that. You had mentioned, you know, him playing his best football this fall, and he has. That's awesome for him.
Competition's been something you and the other coaches have talked a lot about. How have you seen kind of the newcomers and even the quarterback competition just kind of raise the overall level of the offense?
Well, you know, when you start adding depth to a group, okay, it allows you to get more reps, okay, you know, of the things that we're talking about. So let's say you talk about, you know, depth at the receiver position, and you're running a certain scheme or concept that requires 4 receivers to run out there and run a certain route concept. Well, if you only have those 4, that's all you can really ever do with it, right? Well, now if you have 6 or 8 of them, you can go out there and you can get twice as many reps doing the same things. And so when you talk about competition, you talk about depth, and then you talk about reps, and then reps equal development, and that's the kind of program we are. We're a developmental program. So we want to be able to always have players come in here and develop. You don't get to just develop by doing things in the off season and then taking a handful of reps in a practice. You need to have meaningful reps in spring football and fall camp in order for you to grow as a football player. There's 2 times a year where football players, in college at least, I think, grow the most, and it's spring football and fall camp. And for us to go into last spring with a clear picture, right, or at least, you know, to get some developmental reps, go into fall camp with a much clearer picture than we had a year ago at this time, and I hate talking about the past, but again, I just use it as a frame of reference for people who have been around, players included. You know, we're getting more meaningful reps, which allows us to have more critical development.
I want to get your opinion on maybe the development of someone like Trevor Cardell, whether it be from the end of spring to now or even going back to when you first got here. How have you seen him grow, and what do you feel like his role could be this fall?
Well, he'll have a role. You know, he played some I'll use the word significant snaps last year, right? He was kind of projected his more of a well-rounded player at tight end spot, and I see that growth continue happening. He's got the prototypical frame to be a guy who can be used in the perimeter, right, and do things downfield with his size and athleticism, but he's also really embraced some of the things that you asked about before about blocking in the C gap and how well he's done it. So he's attacking in his want to develop in all phases of being a tight end. I wouldn't question it. You know, he definitely wants to be good in his development, and he'll be used that way.
Hey, Andy, name has come up some, was Tanaka Scott. What have you seen from him?
You know, a lot of big body contested catches, right? And like a lot of guys who are younger, you know, the reps that they get, sometimes, you know, early, their head can be swimming a little bit, right? And the game's starting to slow down a little bit more for them. But he's making a bunch of contested catches on film, and he is what they're supposed to look like, if that makes sense, okay? And he's a guy that we're really trying to push along and help him develop and grow in all capacities. He has, to him specifically, and when I hate talking about individuals because I feel like I leave other guys out, he has grown and matured so much, right? Which is what's supposed to happen in college. But his desire and willingness to go in there and get reps, and I'll just give you a specific example. The other night we're doing a walkthrough. And, you know, you kind of have a little rotation of guys going in. Sometimes guys get the reps, sometimes they don't, and they have to just learn by observing. He's like, Coach, give us that again. I want to rotate. I want to get this rep. You know, of course, when fall camp, right, as the routine and consistency starts to challenge your discipline a little bit, and you get into the evening, that time of day, you know, what most college kids are thinking about is going home. He's like, hey, give me another rep of this. Let's call this again. Let's stay out here and do this some more, which is it demonstrates his willingness to want to improve and get better and make sure that he's ready to go take the rep and practice the next day.
And also along the offensive line, you know, last week we heard guys are cross-training, doing some different positions and things. Just talk about the O-line, how's that going, and guys moving around.
Yep, so, you know, I think that's something that probably every football team in the country at every level is a challenge they have. It is the most probably sought-after position in football, offensive lineman, right? Because people want depth there. They understand the importance of having it. And if you've coached long enough, you know what it's like to coach with a team that doesn't have a developed offensive line. So with that, you're always trying to have, you know, I think, you know, I'll use an NFL example. They usually have 7 or 8 guys in a roster, and they're trying to develop and train them to be able to have individuals play certain spots. That's what we're doing a little bit, right? We want to make sure our best players are on the field and playing regardless of what the rotations or who's available, right? We want to make sure that we're not in a situation, kind of like with the skill personnel, where we're saying, well, hey, you know, this guy can only play that position. You know, so, well, we need one there. Too bad that he doesn't play that spot. We want to cross-train them just like we want to do all of our skill players so that in the event that you need them to be able to step on the field, we're doing that. It puts a little more on their plate mentally, right? Initially coming out the gate, it might slow down their ability to execute right out the gate right away. If you ask a guy to play both guard and tackle or center and guard or whatever it might be. But in the long run, that stuff will start to pay off. At this point in camp, you can already see that starting to pay off, which has been good. And I'm happy with what those guys are doing. I've said this before, I think, in this room. You know, championship teams have a couple things in common. And everyone thinks about quarterback play right away, which is really important. But when you look at championship teams, they have good line play on both sides of the ball. And we want to be able to get our program to the point where those are the kind of things we're talking about. So we want to have our line play on both sides of the ball really well developed. And moving guys around will help with that.
Coach, what does it mean for the offense to have to play against a guy like Kenny Logan Jr. every practice?
Well, you should ask Kenny that question. I bet you would get a better answer, which you'll have the opportunity to, right, a little bit later this afternoon. It's great. We talk about competition in here internally. A lot of times the questions here today have been about internally, competition in the receiver room or running back room or the O-line room, wherever it might be. But when you start to have it, offense versus defense, receivers versus DBs, running backs versus linebackers, O-line versus D-line, that's when your quality reps and your development starts to grow exponentially because you're taking a rep against a good football player. And so to have that out there, have good quality players to be going against in practice matters a lot. But ask Kenny the same question. I'm curious to see what he says. But frame it in a way that would present, you know, like, hey, what's it like to go against Coach K every day? See what he says.
I'll make sure that happens, yeah. And then Coach Leipold says you're the only guy that has a video of Jared Casey getting a scholarship. I was one of the price point for that video.
Well, it's going to start pretty high, you know. Certainly Applebee's, at least, right? A couple of Applebee's gift cards. Yeah, it was great. In their office I forget when it was, actually, last spring, I think. You know, he was emotional. He got to talk to his parents, and, you know, credit to him. You know, he's not running out there and waving a flag, look at me. You know, it just speaks to the kind of person him and his family are.
That's awesome. And then I guess lastly for me is there anyone that's stood out from a receiver standpoint in like one-on-ones with the corner safeties?
Well, we brought up Tanaka right earlier, but I tell you, that room, there's a lot of competition in that room, and on a given day, anyone really can show up and flash to make plays. What we're looking for is the person who can do it over and over and over again. But I don't want to single anyone out because you feel bad, but all the guys that we have that have been rotating and all the names that on a given day have showed up to make plays and been explosive and making contested catches and playing fast, which is what we need in that room. We need that.
I guess this is the identity question, but I go back to last year when you had that eliminate bad football kind of mantra or whatever it is. Do you have something like that this year? Is there something obvious? And as far as identity goes, I guess what is it that at the end of a game, win or lose, you want to be able to come in here and say, hey, that's what our offense is about?
Well, if you're going to watch our film, a couple things I'd want you to say was I want to see them go. They're well coached. They're structured, right? Okay, they know how to line up. And they know what they're doing. I want people to say, I want opponents to look at our film and say, that's a physical team. Everyone on that football team plays physical. They play hard with great effort. Okay, they know what they're doing. Those are, I guess, staples of any really good offense, in my opinion. Okay, or any good football team. Beyond that, where we'll never stop emphasizing, the avoidance of bad football. Okay, but as I said earlier, the ability to grow from just focusing on that to now growing for our world to being more explosive in winning situational football has been a big emphasis for us this fall camp. And we've practiced a lot more situations. Our development in that area through the 3 or 4 weeks or however long we've been here now I've been really pleased with. So in order for us to win close football games, we have to win third down. We have to score touchdowns down in the red zone. We have to generate explosive plays on a 5-6 play drive. Those things are not profound or novel, those things that I just said, but they're really important and critical. And at the end of the day, when you talk about successful teams, that's what they do, right? They don't have, there's nothing sexy about it, right? They know that they're able to generate explosive plays. They know they're not going to create turnovers. They're going to avoid penalties, right? They're going to avoid drop passes. They're going to avoid bad football. They're going to get explosive. They're going to score touchdowns. It's not complicated. Yeah, it's easy, right? Okay, just like playing a video game.
Lance had said with Trevor Wilson, in the past, maybe he was a guy who at this point of camp, if he hadn't had the big play and the big flash play, he would get really frustrated and try to press a little bit. And now he hasn't done that, but also hasn't seemed to really complain about not doing that. Just his growth and maturity in the offense, what do you expect from him now as somebody who's a little bit older and knows what he's going on, and then even as a slot guy, just what the expectations of that role might be?
Well, what you're talking about to me is similar to maybe what we talked about with, Tanaka's growth, is that there's this maturity, right? He's learning how to handle adversity, which is something that we're really trying to put our players through fall camp, some adversity. We have to respond to that the right way. And so, and he hasn't had a bad camp, you know what I mean? He's had moments like when we asked about the receiver question, who showed up and made plays. He's done that as well, right? It's now that there's a few other guys around the room that are doing it as well. And so, he understands. He's got a growth mindset. He's going to go out there the next day and just practice, right, again, and to get better. And he asks questions and stays engaged, and he wants to improve. And, I have high expectations for him, as well as a lot of the other guys in that room, the receiver room. But he's still got some juice. He's still fast, and those are things that you're looking for in receivers, obviously. He's a physical, mature guy, like that way, strong. And so as he continues to develop, those are the kind of things you want to see from him.
Got another wide receiver question for you. With Douglas Emilian, we talked to Coach Samuel. He said that he was adapting pretty well. How have you seen him kind of learn the offense, get a feel with the quarterbacks through whatever, the number of practices?
Yep. I could give you a specific example, too, like I gave with Tanaka and his growth mindset in the same kind of environment. Hey, Coach, let me get this rep here. I want to hear this play. I want to reference this call. I want to walk through this, right? The engagement, the wanting to learn it, like those are great indicators of a young man's ability to succeed and start to learn something. How much do they really want to improve? Again, anyone can show up to the things that are mandatory, but to go beyond and be engaged, those are things that you have to choose to do. And Doug's chose to do those things. And it started when he first got here, right? He's right away said, Coach, we got to learn the playbook. What's this called? What's that called? Why is this? You know what I mean? And then we discussed earlier the fact that he could come into a room where there's, I don't know how many other people that have been here for a year to help him grow. That's great. That's what we want from those guys, right? So he is going the right direction, and he's on schedule, if that makes sense.
Is he an inside guy or an outside guy?
Well, kind of like the offensive line, we want to be able to cross-train our guys. Because at the end of the day, based off your personnel that you have on the field, so let's say you have 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. You might line up in a formation that takes one of your traditional outside receivers and puts them in the slot to the field or the boundary, right? So when we do things, 11, 12, 10 personnel, you're going to see those guys hopefully be able to do all of it, right? Okay? We've started probably in the slot with him, right? But you see him take plenty of reps outside as well, based off the personnel.
Sorry, Andy, one more about Bean. I wonder how much you've heard about his speed, whether it's from teammates or on the field after a game. You know, opposing coaches say anything about that to you, or not much?
You know, I mean, obviously I'm out of practice, so I observe those things, right, and get to work with them every day. You know, opposing coaches, you know, I probably, when we spend time and investigate what an opponent's going to say in their media discussion, they all will talk about him being fast, you know, and him being a high school track guy, and addressing that, knowing that you better take the right angle, otherwise it could go a long way. You know, but beyond that, you know what I mean? No one comes up and, you know, grabs me no one goes out of the way and says, hey, you know, yeah. He's fast, though. You know what I mean? People know that and recognize that for sure.
Coach Simpson said the other day that Rich is sort of at the heart of what you guys do. Rich Miller at the heart of what you guys do as a defense. I was just wondering, like, do you see that, and I guess how did he develop into that spot for you?
Yeah, as much as anybody, I think he is, and playing the centerpiece position there at the Mike linebacker spot a lot of the times. Although I think he can play any of our linebacker spots equally well. Knows the defense well. Knows what our expectations are. You know, I think on the field, off the field, I think he's kind of a good model citizen. So yeah, in that respect, I think Rich Miller certainly would be kind of at the center of what we're trying to do.
Brian, when you look generally at what you're trying to do in the secondary, especially at safety, maybe more specifically at safety, what do you ask of your boundary guy, your field guy? How do you want to divide up roles? Because you mentioned Kenny's obviously entrenched here, but you've got guys who've been pushing him, and he's talked about taking reps elsewhere. And how do you try to divide what guys' responsibilities are going to be so that they're given the opportunity?
Well, you know, we try to have everybody be versatile, that they're not just locked into one spot. I can only play the boundary, or I can only play the field. So we're trying to develop within practice. Guys take reps at both positions back there. But you know, our field safety that would play field safety for us is probably involved in a little bit more some man-to-man coverage kind of thing. So there's certain guys that probably have a little bit more wherewithal in that area. Then there's other guys that are maybe better kind of roaming middle of the field, and our boundary, that would be our boundary person, and also getting involved in more involved in some of the run game. So that just suits some players better than others. But quite honestly, I think any player that we have back there could go to either spot and function for sure.
So when you talk about the versatility, then is there a preference between having guys who are physical guys, hard hitters types, like kind of the old school, like, you know, strong safety from years past, or has you guys kind of moved away from that?
Well, yeah, you know, you obviously need, you know, guys to be that way. You'd like everybody to be that way. That's not always everybody's. The forte of every safety's game is not just I'm a headhunter back there. I think that's gone away. I just probably believe more so in today's game. It's a little bit more wide open with space and speed and formation. So you really have to be able to run and cover no matter where you are. So and we're looking for those guys that can, quite honestly, that are aggressive, but yet can also run and cover. Those are the guys that we're looking for, I guess. Yeah.
You have a lot more guys there on defense now, just for depth purposes. How have you seen the overall competition among basically every spot on defense kind of elevate the level of play of whether it be incumbent guys, newcomers, just overall?
I think it's been great. we spend a lot of time mapping out our practices, who's going to get reps during this time and in what order, and you know, where maybe like last year it was, well, this is it, so I guess, you know, they're going to get them all. Now there is a lot of competition, so I think that's been helpful. I think that's sharpened up everybody's game. We haven't really necessarily tried to recruit past or over the guys that were here last year. We've just tried to add more competition to the room and improve ourselves in that way. And I do feel like we've done that at every position. I feel like we're at least at this point, I feel like we're better at every position because of that.
And when we talked to Coach Simpson, he named Tywin Berryhill as the guy that kind of improved the most. What have you seen from him in camp, and what has he brought?
Yeah, I would agree. Just locked in. We talk about, hey, you got to make every rep that you get count, because you're not getting an unlimited number of reps. So make the ones that you get, make them good. I think he's done that. Again, I think he's seen that. Yeah, there are other guys now. There are other options. So I better step up my game, and he's done it on the field, but I think he's done it in the meeting room. I certainly think he's done it off the field. It's been a wonderful transformation just to watch a young man mature in really every way and improve himself around here in every way.
Brian, when you talk about not recruiting over guys, Lance talked about it a few minutes ago too. I wonder how much of that is a culture thing. Have you been places where that's an issue and guys do feel like that's happening, and then that's a problem for a roster, or?
Well, yeah, I think any one of us in this room would probably feel that way if I was an incumbent and then there's a new guy brought in from somewhere, right? That, yeah, I think all of us would feel a certain amount of, you know, it's a bit of a threat, you know. But so we've really tried to help guys see it differently, and we have not had like those kind of issues where we don't have guys that were here that are bitter or resentful or, you know, going against the flow of things because of that. I think everybody's, hey, we all know that we need to improve our team, and we need to improve it in every way. And one of those ways is just the quality of players at every position. So I think everybody's embraced that from my perspective, and I'm really happy about that.
Brian, you would know this better than anybody else, but there's an opportunity here for Rich Miller, Kalen Gervin, Marvin Grant, Lorenzo McCaskill, and somebody else I'm forgetting. A fifth guy from Detroit, who I can't remember off the top of my head, who all played youth football together.
Yeah.
They're all playing in 7- and 8-year-old leagues.
Cornell Wheeler, maybe.
Cornell, yeah. And now they come here and can play together on this team on the field at the same time. What does that say about, maybe it's the league itself or their development, their want to, but the special aspect of that, those five guys growing together and being here?
Well, it makes me thankful that they knew each other growing up, because I don't know that we'd have got all those guys if it didn't happen that way. I think they were really instrumental in the attraction and the recruiting process, and in the contacts and the relationships that they had. So, what I really like is the fact that if I was here and I had a friend somewhere else that was looking for somewhere to go, and I thought this place was no good, if I was a friend, I'd tell them, don't come here, it stinks, right? They're saying exactly the opposite. Hey, there's great opportunity here. We're doing it the right way. I love it. We're going to get better. You can help us. And so I think all that's really been presented the right way. But again, it makes me feel good about what we're doing with the players in our program, that they would want to go get guys and not tell guys to stay away, because I know that happens other places. So.
Coach, the offense has an outstanding running back room. How's that help the defense with Big 12 that has a lot of great running backs?
Yeah, we were just talking about, we're watching practice film before I walked in here, and Kai Thomas takes a handoff and boom, 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 and leaves one of our guys just grasping at straws. I said, that's good, right? And I think that helps make us better. So to have to go against those guys every day is, I think that little by little, that all stacks up and makes a difference in the long run. So again, we're glad about that too, because quite honestly, I want our offense to be awesome. So so more power to them. The harder it is in practice, the better I feel, because I know that's going to translate to success on Saturdays as well.
Hey, Brian, can you talk about the defensive line? What have you seen from the D tackles and the D ends?
Yeah, more of the same in some respects. A lot of great depth, great competition. I think we can probably go, 6 deep at those positions in terms of guys that we feel that we can put in the game at both the interior spot and the end spot. Guys we can put in there without really feeling like we're going to have a lot of drop off of any kind. They're interchangeable parts. Our defensive tackles, we kind of rotate in 3 groups in practice, 1s, 2s, and 3s, and those guys they rotate anywhere from the 1s to the 3s, depending on the day and the period of practice. So again, I feel great that we can roll guys through there. But I know that we've also got some pretty good top end talent as well that are going to make sure we're going to make sure they play how as much as they need to play. But the fact that we can roll guys through there and feel good about who's in there and continue to execute and perform and the way we want to is it feels good, at least right now.
I've got a question just about you turning the clock back a year ago. You're trying to get a new system in. You don't know who the guys are and what you've been able to do for a year. Just how do you feel compared to this time last year?
Yeah, a lot better for sure. I could compare it to, we do have a couple new guys this year, right, that really showed up over the summer. And so we had a team full of those guys last year, right? So those new guys that are here that just showed up, they know it, but there's things that sometimes move too fast for them as well, and they're still growing into it. Well, that's maybe 1 piece or 2 pieces as opposed to 11 pieces last year where it's new to everybody, and so it's been a lot better. I feel like we know our players better, they know us better. They are much more bought in and willing and receptive to everything that we're trying to do on defense and within the program. That's been helpful, and like I said, they're bought in. So and I just feel defensively we've already progressed beyond where we ever were last year in 12 fall camp practices in terms of what we're able to install and what we feel like we can execute during the game. We're already past that point. So again, those are all encouraging signs. Again, we haven't played anybody, we haven't beat anybody, we haven't stopped anybody, we haven't done anything yet this year. But I can tell you going into it, I feel a lot better about things for sure.